All right, I might get started. I suppose I probably don't have to introduce myself, but my name's Sarah Flynn, and just wanted to thank you all so much for being here this weekend. We've had a wonderful time and a wonderful adventure in bringing this event to you guys. It's a project of passion, and I hope that we have shared that passion with you. I'm going to speak a little bit today about a particular aspect of, I suppose, the cultural underpinnings that I see at work in the classical tradition. And it very much dovetails into Diff's speech that he just gave, which is this kind of contrasting between the medieval worldview and the modern worldview. We've got this kind of disjunct with the Enlightenment era. So I'm going to add a little bit more of my own background to that. I read all the wrong books when I was growing up. I actually did my studies in these lecture theatres. Does anybody know what the wonderful design motif is? Any scientists in the room? Yes, I think it is genes, DNA. So genetic, genes, possibly in the process of cells dividing. So I'm going to bring a little bit more of the quadrivium or the sciencey background to balance out that heavy humanities literature base that we often have. We've heard over the past 2 days wonderful ideas about a vision of education so different that it is exciting and delighting to restore and inspire and even to heal individual and society at large. And we've been given the beginnings of some tools to do things differently in our schools and classrooms and homes. But I want to turn to a topic that is a little bit more broad in its vision, and as such, less concrete and more abstract. I want to talk about something that we like to call in Australia, the vibe of the thing. And Americans are going to have to look up that reference. I want to try and define and describe the processes of knowledge that are underlying and connecting these conversations in contrast to our current ways of thinking and being. I want to talk about ontology, the water that we swim in, worldview, and epistemology, our systems of knowledge. This is not a technical analysis per se, as I am ill-equipped to undertake that project at this point. It's more of an armchair philosophy view and a personal journey to share my thoughts with you. An underlying vision that must accompany this renewal project if it is to deliver more than curriculum and behaviour reform, but rather to heal and lead us to a state of flourishing that is not the norm for us currently in the Western world. I speak here of 3 principles that I believe lay the cultural foundation, the correct milieu on which the rest is established. Ravi and Jane, in their work, the Latin liberal arts tradition, set out a complete picture of the tradition that doesn't just include the 7 liberal arts. It includes philosophy and the sciences, I suppose, at the top end. But at the front end, it's packed with piety and paideia and poetic knowledge. So I'm going to dig into those 3 things today. One theme that underscores our cries for integration and flourishing is that of fragmentation. So we've heard that as a theme going through the last 2 days. We see that knowledge has been splintered into disciplines and smaller categories. It's not just biology anymore, but it's genetics. It's not just genetics, but it's molecular genetics. And these ever-tightening walls of information are the product of an epistemology that privileges pulling things apart. As Diff mentioned, Descartes' dictum, I think, therefore I am, is an ultimate expression. For in it, the head is not connected to the body, and the sensed world becomes separated from the realm of thought, and we are on a path of disembodied knowledge. When Descartes sought to reduce reality to a mathematical framework, and as scientific method was developed, it became harder and harder to contemplate the whole. Science requires that only a slice of reality is considered at a time. because only a slice can be measured and assessed. Evidence is gathered to support or refute a prediction, and thus concrete facts are established. For those across the vast swathes of academia today, and certainly in what is quaintly termed social sciences, that includes psychology, education, economics, politics. This mode of establishing valid knowledge, the scientific method, is the only knowledge that exists. If you don't believe me, try doing as I did to writing poetically on your essays or drawing flowers on your botany collection. You are swiftly dismissed. I was actually marked down for drawing flowers on my pressings in botany. In the movement, we have an early adoption of the science of reading and writing. We've seen that begin to take off across, in a big way, across the southern states. As we would call it, phonics and grammar. And it has, I believe, had this easy adoption because it provides a suitable interface with which the system can actually acknowledge its validity. But the problem is that we cannot survive, and we certainly cannot flourish on this way of knowing any longer. And I am convinced that we cannot accomplish our goals of educational renewal by attempting to beat the system on its own terms. No, science is not the correct tool for human flourishing. We cannot build lives, relationships, or a beautiful culture worthy of Imago Dei, made in God's image, on science alone. Yet this is exactly what has happened. And this is the reason, I think, more than ideology or values, why we will struggle with credibility and legitimacy at the outset of our movement. Our mode of knowledge is invisible to the system. I'm reminded of a little parable that I was told when I was studying Aboriginal studies here at the uni by my lecturer, who was describing worldview. And he told a story about a man who was looking around on the ground under a lamplight for something that he had lost. And a police officer comes up to him and says, "What are you doing?" And he says, "I've lost my wallet." And the police officer says, "Well, where did you lose it?" And he says, "Well, I lost it over there." And the officer asks, "Well, why are you looking for it here?" And he says, "Because this is where the light is. This is where I can see." And this is what we're trapped doing. We're trapped looking in the area of light that we're permitted to by the system that we exist within. And so it's very difficult to find the wallet because it actually isn't where we're looking. The lack of visibility is one thing, but this knowledge is perceptible. And it becomes evident when we move outside the system and reflect back on it from a different perspective. I sensed this missing organ throughout my young adult life, and how that faculty has been revealed to me in this movement is in the category of the poetic mode of knowledge. As a child, I was captivated by Sherlock Holmes. My father introduced me to Holmes's attention to minute detail. I was fascinated by his ability to read the signs, his sensitivity to the silent conversation that was all around him, and gave him an almost magical ability to see what was not visible, to connect the disparate parts into a whole, to join the dots. And so I became fascinated with this idea of seeing beyond the mundane. I sought out signposts of this bigger picture in my studies. In my studies of ecology and Aboriginal studies, I saw revealed a culture in Indigenous tradition of reading the signs of the landscape. The landscape tells a story. The keen observations of the Indigenous people of the relationships between the plants and the animals and the places and the seasons and the people. To paint a picture of this country not immediately visible to the Western eye. The blooming woody wattle and the mud crabs, the blooming woody wattle, when it was out, told the people that it was time to harvest the mud crabs, that they were ready to eat. And it was a festival time of the year, so there was a cultural parallel that would go in accompaniment with the ecological relationships. For Aboriginal people, there was no separation between land, culture, people, spirituality. They were an integrated whole. Their worldview is intimately connected with a living sentience that operates through its connectivity. The system and all its parts are alive as the energy flows between them and through them. I'm going to return to this paradigm of the Indigenous worldview a little later, but I have a third anecdote to convey this lost organ, this lost faculty of poetic knowledge in a little more of an explicit way. In my 30s, after my studies, I became interested in psychology and mental health because, let's face it, the classroom is under a lot of duress and teachers are expected to have a skill set that they're just not trained for. I ended up training in equine-assisted psychotherapy. Horses are used for therapy, mainly for children, for whom talking to adults about their dysfunction was on the never-to-do list. So we would have these children that were, very high-end, very difficult, sometimes in foster care. They ended up in equine therapy because the other measures had failed. With horses, communication is entirely non-verbal, unless you are a Narnian horse, of course. And they are prey animals. The eyes are on the side of their head. Unlike predators, we're predators whose eyes are facing forward. So their every posture, their existence on the planet, everything that they take in is a conversation around caution and safety. So in psychotherapy, this disposition becomes a mirror to those around them. The horse is a giant feedback machine. Their bodies are huge, the skin surfaced, and beneath every inch of that skin is nerve cells that are highly sensitized and attuned to the stimulus of their environment. In equine therapy, it is with this sensibility that children are actually mimetically led into self-awareness and self-regulation in a way that no counsellor can match. Let me tell you a story. A boy, known as a bully, brash, harsh, and uncaring, arrived at the arena one day. He cared nothing for horses, and the horses cared nothing for him. These therapy horses were not ridden, and they were not accustomed to doing what they were told if they didn't feel like it. They actually were more like the Narnian beasts. Let's call him Jaden. There's certain names in classrooms, aren't there? J names, I feel like it's J names. Jaden came and chose his horse, and so I apologise to any Jadens in the room, by the way. Jaden came and chose his horse. So the children come together in a group, and we have all the horses ready, and we don't give them many instructions. We just tell them go and choose a horse, and they have a task to do, which is to kind of brush the horse and put a halter on it and lead the horse around the arena. So sometimes some of these things happen, all of these things happen, or none of these things happen. Well, Jaden, in his disposition, stomped out to the middle of the arena with his end in mind, that he was going to dominate this mare, and that he was going to dominate this mare quite quickly and achieve his end. However, she is not used to being treated badly and merely walked away. Well, this pattern was repeated lesson after lesson, and it was so frustrating because the mentor that I worked with, she wouldn't let me say a thing. I was just killing myself trying to find an opportunity to give him some instructions. But it was really the lesson in patience and self-realisation. He had to come to this himself. I wanted to go out and help him. No, she said. She would ask one question: is that working for you? Week after week, he tried with aggression, intimidation, but beneath it all, the real boy was fear-filled, totally insecure, and quite broken. Each time he approached her as a predator, she withdrew. And each time his fear slipped through, she mirrored it. Eventually, something did change. watching the other children lead and play and receive affection from the horses, he broke. He began to observe his environment. The breakthrough came when he learned actually that the mare was only going to allow him near her when he neither bullied nor feared her, but became gentle and brave. When he found peace within himself, he brought this peace to the horse, and after this, everything changed. He was the first off the bus and the last one out of the arena. He and she stood waiting at the gate for him. I'm not lying, these horses really do this. She would bow her head to receive the halter without any trouble at all. She followed him without command, and she nuzzled him, and he nuzzled her, and she never left his side. You see, if a child is a bully, the horse does not accept the treatment. If the child is fear-filled and with anxiety, the horse will not accept them neither, for they feel that the fear, there's something wrong. So the child must self-regulate in the middle. It's Aristotelian. On the final day, even after her halter was removed, she followed him across the arena to the gate. And by that stage, we were all in tears because he didn't want to leave. It was their last day of the session and he would never come back to her. But he was a changed person. You see, this poetic knowledge is a matter of synergy. When the wires are connected, when the notes are in tune, the whole of reality pops alive like magic. Through this experience, even from the sidelines, I became rewired and I began to see exactly how the world is made alive and enchanted. A sensitivity that lay dormant in me was awakened, and I would say my experience of life itself became a kind of enhanced reality. I believe this is the essence of what James S. Taylor describes in his book, Poetic Knowledge. And in fact, in this book, he quotes a passage out of Dickens' Hard Times, where the child is actually asked, the students of Gradgrind, the teacher, are asked to describe what a horse is. And we have these contrasting accounts where Bitzer says that the horse is a quadruped, a graminivorous, 40 teeth, 24 grinders, 4 eye teeth, 12 incisive, sheds its coat in the spring, in marshy countries sheds hoofs too. And age is known by the marks in its mouth. In contrast, Sissy Jupe lived with the horses and described her experience of the horses. Well, I discovered Sissy Jupe's version of the horse through this process, and I fell in love with life in a way that had been extinguished through the majority of my education. Taylor defines poetic knowledge as connatural, or intuitive way of knowing, knowledge that is immediate, experiential, embodied, and born of love. And that is the organ that we are awakening and reanimating. And it lies at the heart of our renewal, at the heart of our humanity, and it is, I believe, a key to human flourishing. We've all experienced this mode of being as a relief from the grinding rat wheel of life, the harmony of just sitting and contemplating, listening to an orchestra, its harmonious resonance, or looking at the stars or walking among the trees and feeling absorbed in wonder, so much so that another dimension seems unreal that is before us, realer than the waking world, perhaps. In fact, we might in psychology call this state a flow state, and it is one of the pillars of psychological well-being that we are chasing. But most of the time, the head is not connected to the body and fragmentation pervades. And the consequence, we search for harmony in our work while battling systems at odds with our humanity. We trade away the present, looking for peace in the promise of the next holiday. Can we afford in this movement to uptake all of these tools and advance our cause without also undergoing this internal rewiring? I want to add another image to emphasize my point here, because there is a lot at stake, I believe, and it is the image of the Emperor's New Clothes. The swindlers sell the emperor a suit that doesn't exist, and the emperor, ill-educated, with poor intellectual formation, plagued by vanity and insecure, plays along. And pretty soon the whole crowd plays along as well. They deny the evidence of their senses. They silence their consciences, and they pretend not to see. Isn't that our culture? I mean, even if we are not in it, we are still bound by it. We are surrounded by systems that scream at us, this is progress, this is innovation, this is well-being. Are you well yet? Yet we know and we feel the emptiness. Our students feel it most of all, and still we front up year on year, looking to educational and psychological sciences, to research-based evidences with their slither of truth mixed with a big lie, and we look for a solution at the very source of the problem. In the story, who speaks the truth? The child, that's right. Not the courtiers, not the emperor. The child, not yet indoctrinated to doubt his eyes, not yet trained to deny reality or self-evident truths. Joseph Pieper, who we might know from Leisure as the Basis of Culture, which is, reading list 101 for the classical renewal, also wrote on the Christian idea of man, where he undertakes an exposition of the cardinal virtues. And he explains the definition of wisdom, which is the queen of the cardinal virtues. To see and affirm reality as it is. Aristotle calls it phronesis, prudence, the virtue that discerns rightly, that perceives the real and acts accordingly. This is exactly the virtue we are missing. There is an irony here. The further we go into quantifying and describing material reality, the further we get from it. When the head is not connected to the body, when perception and cognition are fragmented, wisdom is replaced with an illusion. When Ramandu in The Voyage of the Dawn Treader tells Eustace that he is a star, and Eustace says that is not possible because stars are made of flaming balls of gas and dust. Ramandu's response is what?
In your world. But even in your world, that is not only what a star is.
Yes, it's pretty close, pretty good. It is not what a star, it is what a star is made of, but not what a star truly is. The difference here is between substance and form. Again, an Aristotelian Thomistic metaphysic hidden inside a children's novel. It's brilliant. You see, the materiality is not the fullness of what it truly is. When we base our known universe on a material reality, we become like the emperor, clothed in data and slogans, but naked of truth. So what cultivates prudence, then, that capacity to see rightly? Well, poetic knowledge, piety, and I propose paideia, our culture. If poetic knowledge is the intuitive, contemplative way of knowing that allows us to receive the world in love before we dissect it, piety is a posture of reverence, of humility before God and reality. In the ancient and medieval world, reality was more oriented in the poetic faculty. Another term for it is sacramental. Creation itself spoke of God. Human beings were body and soul, integrated, purposeful, ordered toward union with Him. But in the modern world, we are not a spiritual people. Even if we are in church, our reality has been flattened. The cosmos is not alive and sentient. The trees don't sing to us. There are not magical horses, and meaning is stripped from the mundane. So when I say we are not spiritual people, we believe, we go to church, but we live in a disenchanted age, one that no longer assumes transcendence. A few months ago, my parish priest celebrated his 10-year anniversary of ordination, and it was a Saturday. I'm part of the music ministry, so I was there. I wanted to be there, pretty much. I'll be honest. There were a few other things happening that day that I kind of wanted to go to. And when I looked out at the congregation, I love our parish priest. I actually did really want to be there, but we looked out at the congregation. I saw arriving people en masse, and there's one part of our parish who are East Timorese workers. They come to work on the farms up near where I live. They all came together. They are all ages, a lot of them quite young, and they work incredibly hard, 6 days a week usually. And I thought, what is it that these guys had no question about showing up today for this event? It's not a new observation about church attendance and spirituality. Obviously, we know that it's been falling since the 50s. For the majority, faith is peripheral. Spiritual practice is an elective, not a foundation. And even in our Christian colleges and schools, it's an aside a lot of the time. Unlike the men and women of the classical or medieval world, for whom spiritual way of being was so fundamental as to be invisible, our secularity is now the air that we breathe. And this matters for education greatly. Clark and Jane in the liberal arts tradition remind us that piety is not an optional extra. It is foundational to our movement and gives us proper posture to receive reality as a gift. Piety in the ancient world is a fidelity toward God, family, the polis, and the land. In classical society, religious practice permeated the home, the city, the school. It oriented the soul towards something higher and beyond the self. Without piety, poetic knowledge will be severed from its source. And that is precisely what prepares us for poetic knowledge rightly conceived. If we turn to Taylor's definition of it as a knowledge that is a kind of union between the knower and the known, a knowledge born of love, then piety identifies the Logos, the Christ, as the source of this love, and piety bends us towards reverence. Poetic knowledge allows us to receive that which is reverenced, to be moved by truth, goodness, and beauty before we dissect or measure it. Stratford Caldecott, in Beauty for Truth's Sake, presses this point further. He writes that modern education has become horizontal, concerned only with the measurable, the useful, the material, but that true education is vertical, oriented towards the transcendent, toward God himself. Piety grounds us in this vertical orientation, and poetic knowledge enables us to encounter it. My argument is that classical education and the intellectual formation is essentially this transcendent dimension of knowledge, and therefore is poetic in its true nature. So, poetic knowledge and piety belong together. Without piety, poetic knowledge collapses into sentimentality, and without poetic knowledge, piety risks becoming an empty ritual. But together they restore the unity of head and heart, mind and body, reason and wonder. This is why when we speak of human flourishing, we cannot begin with curriculum and technique, but we must begin with a posture, with a reverence, with piety. For these are the soul in which paideia grows. I want to, for a moment, suggest a bold possibility. As I've outlined, the West has been shaped by these two epistemologies for centuries. The Thomistic Aristotelian tradition, a way of knowing that begins with the senses and is elevated by the intellect and culminates in the contemplation of the highest realities. Knowledge as participation in being itself. The second is the modern scientific tradition, a way of knowing that begins with doubt, that measures, predicts and tests, and seeks mastery over the material world, and has yielded undeniable material prosperity and healing and comfort. Both in their own domains, they have immense power. But here is our tragedy. They have been set against each other. Faith against reason. The transcendent against the material. And we have a tendency to do that in this movement. Wonder against analysis. However, if we desire a flourishing culture and a system of thought that is not desirable or possible to do, it's not possible to do away with either. So, what if the future of knowledge is a new epistemology, one that honours the Aristotelian vision of participation and also recognises the legitimate insights of science, but restoring it to its proper place? When Aristotle and Aquinas were articulating their systems of knowledge, science simply did not exist in the highly sophisticated form that we depend on today. Organic chemistry, calculus, quantum physics, genetics, digital technology did not exist. And let's be honest, we're not going to do away with these things. But conversely, we cannot abide by what has happened to our humanity through the over-exercising of this one knowledge type to the extent that it is now synonymous with the concept of knowledge. Such an epistemology would resist reductionism, but it wouldn't retreat into anti-scientific romanticism, which has often been the case in Christian education. It would be, in Stratford Caldcott's words, vertical as well as horizontal. It would be poetic as well as rational, grounded in the senses but orienting towards God, and yet modern in recognising the astonishing powers of empirical discovery. It's only a sketch, but I believe that it is a philosophical project of our time to unify what has been sundered, to reimagine knowledge itself and inspire ourselves forward. And if we succeed, we may enable a reimagining of academia itself. One that is whole, not disconnected, not an emperor parading in illusion, but a soul alive to both the transcendent and the material. I'm going to close this afternoon with the idea of paideia, because it's where I want to land. It's closest to my heart and closest to my vision for this conference and this movement. Piety is the posture of reverence. The poetic knowledge is our mode of receiving reality in love and moving towards that beatific vision. Paideia is the broader culture of cultivation of the whole person. I want to close with an image of our gathering today, an image of community culture that sits in contrast to our hyper-individualistic one. The image that popped into mind overnight was that of the starlings, flocks. The flocking starlings, the massive tessellations of thousands and thousands of birds moving without communicating, yet in perfect harmony. What is it about that? Perfect synchronicity. Not that I'm going to suggest that our movement this weekend has been as flawless and as poetic as starlings, but it's a metaphor for us to aim towards. The starlings, as it turns out, move in response to minute actions of those birds that are closest to them. The smallest response can drive a new wave of motion and beauty. In the Aboriginal model of society that I mentioned earlier, it was articulated in a thesis called "The Dingo Makes Us Human." The individual was defined as both an autonomous entity, free to act, free to move. However, they're also defined through their relationship within the system. There's an intimate tangling of lives together, without which one cannot know and cannot be oneself truly. And this is the image, the call of community with which I want to leave you today. That's it. Thank you. Did anyone want to ask a question? Yes.
You stated that we must begin with piety.
Mm-hmm.
I guess coming from more of a systems level of change perspective, if we wish to change the life trajectories of those young people who are currently in Australian public schools, where the majority of adult teachers perhaps don't share a belief in a deity, where should we start?
Well, I think we can start with the transcendence of the beautiful, the true and the good. I don't think there's too many people that would be anti that, even in the most secular space. And it's a really nice way of cutting through into a transcendent opportunities, transcendent experiences, and the poetic knowledge, the fact that children are already moving and breathing in a different way, a way of being that actually kind of gets killed off towards the end of primary school. Yeah. Yes.
Question about how what we've heard about the teacher as curriculum fits with what you're saying.
How I think of that?
Yeah.
Well, we're being drawn into an experience of reality and into relationships. So in the ecosystem, all parts are intimately connected. And I think in our individualistic mindset, there's a lot of separation between the parts. But I think, any teacher knows there's this very close connection between, there's an exchange. So it's becoming more aware of actually the nature of that exchange that's going on, not just of information and intellectual, but our body language, our essence, who we are. So it's very much in line with, the teacher as the curriculum. And also the requirement that we reform ourselves. I think most of the time when we attend professional development or we want to see a change in the system, we actually don't see ourselves as the people that need changing. Anything but that. It requires, it's kind of like a happy, sad thing, because on one hand, what's on offer is a wonderful renewal for individuals, for all individuals that are, not just for the children, for the teachers as well. But it requires energy and effort. So I think teachers need to be prepared to read books and be on their own journey. Yeah. Yes.
You spoke on a few different points about Australia's unique sort of history and role connected up with the group. Do you think, could you expand a little bit on what do you think Australia could provide to this conversation in terms of maybe in some point in the future, what could we take with speakers of our own and going to America or going to the UK?
Yeah, 100%. I think that's the thing that was kind of in my heart when I founded my business with the name Logos Australis, is that we're all parts of the body. And in this country, we have a tendency to depend on external authorities to tell us what to do and to take direction. But the Logos is something that's, bypass. It's something. It's personal. It's our own, and so it's incumbent upon us to become liberated enough to engage with those ideas freely. So I think in a more material, in a more practical sense, I could suggest that perhaps our relationship to the land and our heritage with Indigenous knowledge systems is a very powerful, has a lot of potential, and it's a big gap, I would say, in the renewal movement at the moment in the US. The relationship to nature and creation. Haven't heard much about that. I think, yeah.
That would be the same in New Zealand.
Yeah. Yes. I'm not dismissing. I'm a sample size of one. I don't know everything that is, you know, a part of the discussions in the States. But yeah, what do you guys think?
I think you're right. I think there are lots of gaps in the way that the renewal has been understood and realized in the States. I think, you know, unfortunately, sometimes it's politicized. And so, in the States anyway, you know, so-called environmental concerns are really associated with one side of the political spectrum. Then the other side kind of dismisses care for the land, for creation. And I think that's really a poverty. You know, it's kind of like, because this group of people that we see, we think we're at odds with, sort of latched onto an important issue. You know, we say, well, it's their issue, won't have anything to do with it. And in fact, I think it's really irresponsible because I would argue that let's say, the progressive side and the way it looks at nature is really looking at upside down. And so there's something from the tradition in the way of looking at nature, our relationship to creation, our work, for instance, as stewards of creation, and that very important relationship that needs to be thought through. We can't just be reactive to, you know, things that we're allergic to politically. And I do think a reverence for those who come before us who were close to the earth, close to creation, perhaps saw meaning within it that we over time have been blinded to is, it's a beautiful possibility and something that we should be open to. And there are other gaps too. I mean, I don't think in the States enough attention has been put into the body, gymnasium, physical education. So there are these incredible opportunities, and I would say the renewal in the States is early adolescence at best.
That's good. Yeah. Yeah, I think that what we're doing here is a form of true human culture. That's what it boils down to. And I think we are at odds with our postmodern culture as much as all of the other groups of people who are anti-Western for whatever reason. And it's sort of, it hurts me that we haven't quite got that message across yet. I don't know how we're going to bridge the gap in our discourse to shift it a little bit, because we don't even, I mean, I reached out to some Aboriginal writers and philosophers, but it's so hotly political still that I don't even think we're going to get to have a conversation for a little while yet. Yeah, maybe we will. Yeah. All right, well, if nobody has any more questions, I think it might be lunchtime. Thanks for having me.